What if beauty itself became a crime? Imagine a dim medieval chamber lit only by trembling candlelight. In its center stands a woman, her face, once praised in poems, now covered by iron. The mask isn't to protect her, it's to erase her. Crafted with cruel precision, its metal edges cut into the skin each time she breathes. To the world outside, her punishment isn't for murder or betrayal, it's for being beautiful. Because in a society ruled by fear and faith, beauty was never just appearance, it was power. And power, when found in the wrong body, had to be punished. The same faces painted in devotionals and worshipped by kings became symbols of sin when seen without permission. Men built sermons around their envy, laws around their lust, and cages around their shame. This is the story of how beauty, the soft curve of a cheek, the brightness of a smile, was turned into evidence of evil. A history where women's faces were not admired but owned, branded, or hidden. Because to control beauty was to control desire, and to control desire was to control the world. Beauty in the ancient world was never innocent. It was power disguised as fragility, and power was always feared when it belonged to women. In Rome, philosophers wrote that a woman's face could corrupt an empire. In the Bible, Eve's curiosity became the reason mankind was damned. In every age that followed, this myth repeated itself, that women's beauty could topple kingdoms, seduce saints, and summon disaster. The solution wasn't to understand it, it was to control it. In the temples of Byzantium, nuns were forced to cut their hair and smear ash on their faces to prove humility. In medieval England, laws dictated how bright a woman's dress could be, how tight her corset should fit, how much of her hair could show. Beauty became dangerous the moment it was noticed. A beautiful woman wasn't a blessing, she was a warning. The church preached that beauty was the devil's favorite disguise. Priests warned men to guard their eyes and women to hide their faces. The Virgin Mary was idolized precisely because she was pure, distant, untouchable. Flesh was temptation, skin was sin. Even queens cloaked in silk and jewels were not safe from suspicion. Their charm was seen as manipulation, their elegance as deceit. In sermons, preachers compared beautiful women to snakes, alluring, silent, venomous. The idea spread like wildfire through courts and villages alike. A woman too lovely was a danger to order. Beauty meant influence, and influence meant rebellion. It could make men disobey priests, kings, even God. And so, to protect morality, women's bodies were disciplined. They were hidden behind veils, covered in wimples, or forced to wear drab, heavy garments that muted their presence. But beauty could not be erased, only punished. The paradox was cruel men built entire economies on women's beauty: paintings, poetry, marriages, and politics. Yet the same beauty they profited from was also the one they feared most. Artists painted idealized saints while condemning living women for resembling them. Every compliment carried a threat: you are too beautiful for your own good. Some cultures turned beauty into a measurable sin. In Florence, women accused of vanity were forced to stand in public squares while their hair was burned off. In parts of Germany, wives who used cosmetics could be fined or whipped. In France, courtesans were branded behind the ear, a permanent mark of temptation incarnate. Even their punishment had to scar the very thing that gave them power. The logic was consistent. Beauty led to pride. Pride led to desire. Desire led to chaos. The body was the battlefield on which this moral war was fought, and every scar, every shaved head, every law that restricted color or cloth was a declaration that beauty belonged not to women, but to the men who controlled them. But the truth was more complex. What men feared wasn't beauty, it was visibility. To be seen was to exist. To be admired was to have influence. Beauty made women impossible to ignore, and in a world built on silence, that was intolerable. The paradox deepened through the centuries. When men painted the faces of saints, they praised divine radiance. When they saw the same light in living women, they called it vanity. When beauty obeyed, it was sacred. When it defied, it became sin. That is how admiration turned into accusation and desire into justification for cruelty. The message was clear: if beauty could inspire rebellion, then pain would be its cure. And so began a darker chapter of history, one where punishment was designed not to kill, but to mark beauty itself. Because when a woman's face became too powerful to ignore, the only way to control it was to destroy it. There was a time when punishment didn't end with pain, it began with the mirror. Across medieval Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, beauty became the battlefield for control. When sermons failed to tame desire, iron and fire took over. Each tool, each device, each ritual of disfigurement carried one message: that a woman's beauty was never hers to keep. One of the most common forms of humiliation was branding a punishment meant to leave beauty marked for eternity. In England, women accused of adultery or prostitution were branded on the face or shoulders with hot irons shaped like letters. A for adulteress, B for blasphemer, H for harlot, Sh for. The glowing metal hissed as it touched the skin, and for the rest of her life the woman would carry the signature of her shame. A single glance told the world she had once dared to be desirable. Then came shaving rituals, simple, public, devastating. Hair was not just vanity, it was identity, fertility, allure. In France and Germany, women found guilty of moral crimes were stripped and had their heads forcibly shaved before crowds. The act wasn't about hygiene or punishment, it was about humiliation. Hairless, they were neither maidens nor wives, stripped of both beauty and belonging. The laughter of the crowd became the final cruelty, echoing long after the shears were gone. But for those deemed dangerously beautiful, there were inventions far more cruel. In Spain and Italy, heated metal masks were used to purify women accused of seduction or witchcraft. These masks were crafted to mimic the female face-curved lips, hollowed eyes but lined inside with spikes or rough iron. When strapped on, the skin beneath would blister and bleed, fusing flesh to metal. The face, once an object of admiration, became a symbol of suffering. In Eastern Europe, some nobles employed the mirror cage, a small iron frame placed over the head, lined with reflective fragments. Every movement forced the woman to look at herself while being tormented. "Let her vanity be her torment," a 15th-century Hungarian noble reportedly wrote. It was psychological warfare disguised as moral discipline. Religious punishments were no kinder. Nuns who were accused of vanity were made to wear chains around their necks with small mirrors attached, forcing them to confront their sin of self-admiration each time they looked down. Some were forced to walk barefoot through towns, faces smeared with ash, carrying signs reading, "I loved my reflection more than my soul." And yet, beneath the brutality, the pattern was always the same. Beauty was punished only when it belonged to the wrong person. When queens adorned themselves, it was grace. When peasant women did the same, it was temptation. When noble ladies wore rouge, it was fashion. When servants copied them, it was sin. Every scar carved into a woman's face was an act of ownership, a reminder that even her appearance existed under male authority. The state could mutilate, the church could justify, the crowd could cheer. Each one played a role in maintaining the illusion that punishment was moral, not monstrous. But the deeper horror wasn't in the tools, it was in the belief that disfigurement could cleanse, that by destroying beauty they could restore purity. Across Europe, priests called it redemption through ugliness. The body was treated as a lesson, the wound as a warning. And as centuries passed, the tools grew subtler, but no less cruel. Because even when the iron masks were gone, society found new ways to scar. The iron masks may have rusted, but the rules they forged never truly disappeared. The medieval obsession with controlling women's beauty evolved traded for subtler, shinier tools, but driven by the same hunger for dominance. What fire once burned into flesh, society now etches into self-image. Today, no priest brands women in the square, but social media does it silently every day. The gaze of millions has replaced the crowd, and judgment still arrives disguised as fascination. Filters, algorithms, and comment sections recreate the ancient theatre, a stage where beauty is watched, measured, envied, and condemned. Women are still punished for being too much or too little, praised and destroyed in the same breath. She's beautiful, they say, but she knows it. The same phrase that justified public shame centuries ago. The paradox persists. A woman's beauty is still currency, still a battlefield, still an invitation for others to decide what she deserves. The ancient notion of moral appearance lives on in dress codes, purity culture, and digital shaming. When a woman dares to own her reflection without apology, without fear, she becomes what medieval societies feared most, untamed. Every generation rebrands the same punishment. The corset became the diet. The veil became the image filter. The iron mask became the beauty standard, invisible, internal, and impossible to remove. The chains are now psychological, the spikes replaced by comparison and expectation. Yet the wounds they leave feel eerily familiar. In modern advertising, beauty remains an instrument of obedience. Entire industries thrive on convincing women that they are one product away from worthiness. Fix yourself, the modern priests whisper, through slogans, influencers, and glossy screens. The difference is that now the cage is self-maintained. Women learn to police their own reflections, to carry invisible shame for being human in a world that profits from their insecurity. But not all mirrors are cruel. For every age that tried to silence women through shame, another emerged to reclaim beauty as defiance. In the past, women wrote under pseudonyms, painted behind closed doors, and turned their pain into art. Today, they use cameras, voices, and platforms to reclaim the narrative. Where once the mirror reflected judgment, now it can reflect power. Still the ghosts remain. Every too bold headline, every too revealing outfit, every aging badly comment echoes the same medieval sermon: control the woman who dares to be seen. The setting has changed from cobblestone squares to glowing screens, but the story has not. Because the real threat was never beauty, it was always autonomy. The power to exist without permission, to look back, unflinching, at the world that insists on defining you. So when we study the masks, the razors, and the brands of the past, we aren't just looking at history, we're staring into a mirror that still reflects us, a mirror forged in iron and shame, but now illuminated by awareness. Beauty was never the sin was control. And as long as society keeps rewriting that story, the punishment continues, just with a prettier face.